The message came while I was finalizing a quarterly forecast that would quietly decide whether a mid-sized healthcare company survived the year. It was late evening. The office was nearly empty. The city outside my window was lit in soft gold, the kind of light that makes everything look more stable than it actually is. My phone buzzed once, a family group message. I didn't open it right away. I already knew the tone before reading a single word. Urgent, collective, decided without me. When I finally looked, the message was short. They said the family had agreed I would be covering my sister's wedding expenses. They said it was my responsibility. They said if I couldn't step up, maybe it would be better if I stopped showing up at all. No greeting, no question, just an ultimatum disguised as tradition. I didn't feel angry. What I felt was familiar. That quiet tightening in the chest that comes when you realize you were never part of the discussion, only the solution. I set my phone face down on the desk and stared at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. For a moment, I looked exactly like the person my family believed I was. Reliable, invisible, useful. They had no idea how expensive that assumption was about to become. I'm 36 years old, and I live alone in a renovated loft just outside downtown Seattle. On paper, my life looks understated. No flashy car, no dramatic social media presence, no lifestyle that invites commentary. That's intentional. I learned early that the quieter I kept my success, the easier it was to exist inside my family without triggering resentment or expectations. I work in financial operations, specifically risk mitigation and structural planning for companies that are one mistake away from collapse. It's not glamorous work, but it's precise, and it pays extremely well. My parents don't understand what I do. They just know I make good money and don't have many expenses, which in their minds makes me available. I grew up in a small suburb where success was measured publicly. My father valued order, reputation, and sacrifice, as long as the sacrifice belonged to someone else. My mother valued harmony, which often meant smoothing over unfairness until it became invisible. And my sister was the center. She was emotional, expressive, always needing support, always needing help, always needing someone else to absorb the consequences of her choices. I was the opposite. I learned how to disappear into competence. When something went wrong, I fixed it quietly. When money was tight, I adjusted my own plans. When conflict brewed, I stepped aside. Not because I was weak, because someone had to keep the structure from collapsing. That someone was always me. By the time we were adults, the pattern was cemented. My sister's crises were framed as moments of growth. Mine were framed as inconveniences. She moved back home twice. I never did. She switched careers 3 times. I stayed steady. She got engaged quickly, dramatically, publicly. I was asked, gently at first, how much I planned to contribute. At first, it was just suggestions, a dress fund, a venue deposit, a few temporary expenses. I didn't say no, I just asked for clarity. That was my first mistake. The wedding grew faster than anyone admitted. The venue upgraded. The guest list doubled. The budget inflated quietly, like a balloon no one wanted to acknowledge was about to burst. Every time the numbers shifted, the expectations shifted with them, because I could handle it, because I didn't have kids, because I didn't complain, because I always landed on my feet. What no one asked was whether I wanted to be the foundation anymore. The night before the message arrived, I'd been reviewing my own finances, not because I was struggling, but because I was tired. Tired of carrying invisible weight, tired of being assumed instead of consulted, tired of being treated like a resource instead of a person. I remember thinking briefly that I needed boundaries. I didn't realize how quickly I'd be forced to draw them. When my parents framed the demand as duty, something inside me finally clicked. Not broke, clicked. They weren't asking because they needed help. They were asking because they believed refusal wasn't an option, and that belief rested on years of silence I had mistaken for peace. I didn't respond to the message that night. I finished my work, shut down my computer, and walked home through streets that felt oddly calm. At home, I poured a glass of water and opened a document on my laptop. At the top, I typed a single line: wedding contributions, actual versus assumed. Below it, I started listing numbers. Every transfer, every deposit, every temporary expense that had quietly become permanent. Then I opened another document. This one wasn't about money, it was about leverage. Because when people confuse your stability for obligation, the only language that changes the dynamic is structure, and I knew structure better than anyone in my family ever realized. I went to bed that night without replying, not out of fear, but because I needed time to decide what disappearing forever would actually look like. I didn't answer the message the next morning either. Not because I didn't know what to say, because I knew exactly what saying anything would trigger. Questions that weren't really questions. Guilt framed as concern. Urgency disguised as love. Instead, I did what I've always done when things mattered. I prepared. The first thing I did was review every financial interaction I'd had with my family over the last 5 years. Not emotionally, methodically. I pulled bank statements, transfers, notes I'd scribbled in margins and forgotten about because no one ever acknowledged them. The total surprised even me, not because it was devastating, but because it was invisible. Thousands spent quietly, tens of thousands normalized, all without a single conversation about limits. I realized something uncomfortable. They didn't see this as generosity. They saw it as baseline. By noon, my phone started buzzing again. Individual messages this time. My mother first. Soft, measured, carefully phrased. She said weddings are stressful. She said her sister was overwhelmed. She said family shows up when it matters. She didn't ask if I was okay. She assumed I would be. Then my father. Shorter, more direct. He said this was about unity, about tradition, about what people would say if things fell apart. He didn't mention money directly. He didn't need to. My sister waited until evening. Her message was longer, emotional, fragmented, strategically vulnerable. She said she felt abandoned. She said she never asked for much. She said she thought I loved her. That one landed differently, not because it was convincing, but because I recognized the pattern. Emotion first, details later. Responsibility transferred quietly. I still didn't respond. Instead, I opened my calendar and canceled something I'd been looking forward to for months, a weekend trip I'd planned for myself. I stared at the empty space it left. Then I booked something else, an appointment with a financial attorney. The meeting lasted 45 minutes. I explained everything calmly, the wedding, the demands, the history. The attorney didn't react emotionally. That alone was validating. She asked one question that stuck with me. Have you ever explicitly agreed to fund this wedding? I hadn't. Everything had been assumed. That night, I drafted a response. Not to send, just to see it on the screen. It was factual, neutral, clear. It outlined what I had already contributed, what I was not committing to, what boundaries would look like moving forward. I read it 3 times. Then I deleted it. It was too reasonable. They weren't looking for clarity. They were looking for compliance. 2 days later, the family group chat lit up again. This time, the tone had shifted. Less polite, more urgent. Deadlines were mentioned. Deposits. Vendors waiting. Someone wrote that my hesitation was causing stress for everyone. That phrase, for everyone, as if the pressure wasn't coming from one direction. That's when I noticed something. No one asked what I wanted. Not once. Not about the wedding. Not about my finances. Not about my life. They spoke around me, at me, never with me. I took a deep breath and opened a new document. This one wasn't for numbers. It was about decisions. I listed what I would continue supporting, what I would no longer absorb, what silence would mean if I chose it. The list was shorter than I expected because I'd already been living it. The final message came late that night. My father again. This one didn't pretend. He said if I refused, I shouldn't bother coming to the wedding. He said family doesn't work like that. He said choices have consequences. I read it slowly. Twice. Then I smiled, not because it was funny, because it was honest. For the first time, they said the quiet part out loud. I didn't reply immediately. I went to sleep, peacefully. And when I woke up the next morning, something had shifted, not in them, in me. By noon, I'd made my decision, not impulsively, not emotionally, but with the same clarity I use when advising companies how to survive collapse. I understood the risk, I accepted the cost, and I was done pretending the foundation could keep cracking without consequences. I sent the message at 9:17 a.m.
Not after pacing, not after rewriting it 10 times. Once. It was short, clear, final. I said I would not be paying for the wedding. I said my decision was not a negotiation. I said I loved them, but I would not be threatened into sacrifice anymore. I didn't explain, I didn't justify, I didn't apologize. The response came faster than I expected. My mother called first. Her voice wasn't soft this time. It was sharp with disbelief, like I'd broken an unspoken rule she assumed I knew by heart. She said she didn't recognize me anymore. She said family doesn't abandon each other like this. She said I was choosing money over blood. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I said one thing. I'm choosing myself over fear. Then I ended the call. My father followed. His message wasn't emotional, it was transactional. He said if I didn't step up, I shouldn't bother showing up. He said I was embarrassing them. He said he wouldn't explain my absence to relatives. That part mattered to him most. I noticed that. I didn't respond. The group chat exploded. Accusations disguised as disappointment. Long messages rewriting history. Reminders of everything they'd ever done for me. Not one mention of what I had already given. Not one acknowledgement of how much I'd carried quietly. I muted the thread. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful at first. It was loud in its own way. I replayed moments, questioned timing, wondered if there had been another path. But then something unexpected happened. Nothing else did. No emergency, no collapse, no catastrophe. The world didn't end because I said no. 2 days later, my sister posted engagement photos online, smiling, perfect lighting, carefully cropped. The caption thanked everyone who supported us. I wasn't tagged. I didn't feel angry. I felt relieved. The wedding came and went without me. I spent that weekend alone. Not lonely. Alone. I cooked slowly, walked without destination, turned my phone off for 12 uninterrupted hours. I slept better than I had in years. After the wedding, the tone changed again. My mother sent a message pretending nothing had happened. She asked how work was going. I didn't answer. Not out of spite, out of clarity. I was done participating in selective memory. Weeks passed, then months. Family gatherings continued without me. Photos circulated. Holidays were planned. My absence became normalized. And something else happened too. So did my peace. Without constant obligation, my finances stabilized in ways I hadn't expected. Not because I was suddenly richer, because I wasn't constantly leaking energy. I started investing in myself the way I'd invested in everyone else. Time, rest, plans that didn't require permission. One evening, my father called again. His voice was quieter this time. He said things hadn't turned out the way they expected. He said weddings were expensive. He said they thought I'd eventually come around. That sentence, they thought. I told him gently that expectations without consent aren't agreements. He didn't argue, he just sighed. We didn't reconcile, not fully, but something shifted. They stopped demanding. They stopped assuming. They started asking, sometimes. And when they did, I answered only when I wanted to. I learned something important in the aftermath. Boundaries don't break families. They reveal which ones were held together by pressure. Love doesn't require sacrifice that empties you, and duty is not the same thing as obedience. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected, and the space that created became the foundation of a life that finally felt like mine. Closing reflection. Some people confuse generosity with obligation. They mistake access for entitlement. But the moment you stop paying for peace, you discover how much peace actually costs, and how valuable it is when it's finally yours.